Her fingers dug into my jacket with a strength that didn't match her frail body. I felt her nails through the thick fabric, trembling but desperate. Her eyes locked onto mine, wide and glassy with terror, the kind of fear that comes from being chased for too long. Her voice cracked when she whispered those 4 words. "They're hunting me." At first, I thought she was confused, maybe lost, maybe mentally ill. I've seen people like that before, wandering the streets at night, talking to shadows. But then I looked past her shoulder and saw them. 3 figures standing under the streetlight at the end of the block. They weren't moving, just watching. And that's when I knew she wasn't confused at all. My name is Marcus Hale. I spent 8 years in the army, most of it overseas, in places I don't talk about anymore. When I came back, I couldn't find work that didn't feel like a cage. So I took night shifts at a warehouse on the south side of the city. The pay was decent. The hours were quiet and nobody asked questions. I liked it that way. Most nights I'd finish around 2 in the morning, walk 3 blocks to my truck, and drive home through empty streets. That's what I was doing when she grabbed me. It was a Tuesday in late November. The air was cold enough to sting your lungs and the streets were silent, except for the hum of a distant generator. I had just locked the warehouse gate and was heading toward the parking lot when I heard footsteps behind me. Fast. Panicked. I turned and saw her running toward me, stumbling like her legs couldn't keep up with her body. She was old, maybe 70. Her gray hair hung loose and tangled around her face. Her clothes were torn and dirty, smeared with something dark that could have been mud or blood. Her left cheek was swollen, a deep purple bruise spreading from her eye to her jaw. She wasn't wearing shoes. Her bare feet were cut and bleeding, leaving faint red prints on the pavement. When she reached me, she didn't ask for help. She just grabbed my jacket and pulled me close. Her breath smelled like rust and fear. "They're hunting me," she said again, louder this time, like she needed me to believe her. "Please, you have to help me. They won't stop. They never stop." I tried to pull her hands off me gently. "Mom, what's going on? Are you hurt? Do you need an ambulance?" She shook her head violently. No police, no hospitals. They'll find me. They have people everywhere. You don't understand." Her voice dropped to a whisper again. "They took my daughter. They took her 2 weeks ago, and when I tried to find her, they came for me too." I glanced over her shoulder again. The 3 figures were still there, but now they were moving, slowly, 1 step at a time. They didn't rush. They didn't call out. They just walked toward us with the kind of patience that made my skin crawl. "Who are they?" I asked. She looked back, and her whole body stiffened. "We have to go. Now, please." I'm not the kind of person who walks away when someone's in trouble. I've seen too much to ignore it, so I made a decision. "All right, come with me." I grabbed her arm and started walking toward my truck, keeping my pace steady but quick. She stumbled beside me, her breath coming in short gasps. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you. I didn't know who else to ask. I've been running for 3 days. I can't keep going. I can't." I didn't answer. I was too focused on the sound behind us. Footsteps, 3 sets, still slow, still synchronized. I risked a glance back and saw them more clearly now. All men, all dressed in dark jackets and jeans. One of them had a shaved head. Another wore a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. The third had his hands in his pockets, walking like he had all the time in the world. None of them looked like street criminals. They looked organized, professional. We reached my truck, and I unlocked it quickly, pushing the woman into the passenger seat. She curled up immediately, pulling her knees to her chest. I got in the driver's side and started the engine. As I pulled out of the lot, I checked the rearview mirror. The 3 men stopped at the edge of the parking lot. They didn't chase us. They just stood there watching. One of them lifted his hand and waved, not a friendly wave, a promise. I drove 4 blocks before I spoke. "What's your name?" She didn't answer right away. She was staring out the window, her hands gripping her knees so tight her knuckles were white. "Helen," she finally said. "Helen Torres." "All right, Helen, I'm Marcus. Now tell me what's going on. Who are those men?" She closed her eyes and took a shaky breath. "They work for a man named Victor Crane. He runs a network, trafficking girls, young women. My daughter, Sophia, she was walking home from her shift at the diner 2 weeks ago, and they took her, just grabbed her off the street. I went to the police, but they said there wasn't enough evidence. They said she probably ran away. But I know my daughter. She wouldn't run. So I started looking myself. I asked around. I offered money to people who might know something. And then I found someone who talked, a girl who escaped. She told me where they keep them, an old motel on the east side. She said Victor Crane owns it, that he uses it as a holding place before he moves the girls out of the city. I kept driving, my hands tight on the wheel. So what did you do? Helen's voice cracked. I went there, 2 nights ago. I just wanted to see if Sophia was inside. I didn't have a plan. I just needed to know. But they saw me. They chased me. I ran and I've been running ever since. I tried to hide, but they always find me. I don't know how. It's like they know where I'm going before I do. I pulled into an empty parking garage and stopped the truck on the 2nd level. I killed the engine and turned to face her. Why won't you go to the police? She laughed bitterly. Because Victor Crane has police on his payroll. I don't know who. I don't know how many. But the girl who escaped told me that. She said some of the cops bring him information, help him cover things up. If I go to the station, I'm dead. I sat back and rubbed my face. This was worse than I thought. Human trafficking rings with police protection. That meant money, power, connections. This wasn't some street gang. This was organized crime. Did you see your daughter at the motel? Helen shook her head, tears streaming down her face. No, I didn't get close enough, but I know she's there. I can feel it. And now they're going to kill me before I can get her back. I looked at her for a long moment. She was broken, exhausted, hopeless, but she was also a mother fighting for her child. I knew that kind of determination. I'd seen it in war zones, in villages where parents would do anything to protect their kids. And I'd learned a long time ago that sometimes the system doesn't work. Sometimes the law fails. And when that happens, someone has to step up and do what's right, even if it's not legal. All right, I said. I'll help you. Helen's eyes widened. You will? Yeah, but we do this my way. No police, no hospitals. We find your daughter and we get her out. But you have to trust me. Can you do that? She nodded quickly, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. Yes, thank you so much. I started the engine again and pulled out of the garage. First, we need to get you somewhere safe. Then I need to make some calls. Helen grabbed my arm. Please don't leave me alone. They'll find me. I won't, I said. You're staying with me. I drove to my apartment, a small 1-bedroom place on the north side. It wasn't much, but it was secure. I had reinforced the door myself and installed extra locks, old habits from my time overseas. I brought Helen inside and sat her down on the couch. She looked around nervously, like she expected the men to burst through the walls. You're safe here, I told her. No one knows about this place. Get some rest. I'll keep watch. She nodded but didn't move. She just sat there staring at her hands. I went to the kitchen and made coffee. While it brewed, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. I had a few people I could call, people who owed me favors, people who operated outside the system. One name stood out, Danny Ortiz, former Marine, now a private investigator who specialized in cases the cops wouldn't touch. I dialed his number. He picked up on the 3rd ring. Marcus, it's 2 in the morning. This better be good. I need information on someone named Victor Crane, human trafficking operation, East Side. There was a pause. That's a dangerous name to say out loud. I know. Can you help? Danny sighed. Yeah, I'll dig around. Give me a few hours. Thanks, I owe you. You owe me a lot of things. I'll add it to the list. He hung up. I poured 2 cups of coffee and brought one to Helen. She took it with shaking hands. Who was that? Someone who can help us find your daughter. She nodded and sipped the coffee. Why are you doing this? You don't even know me. I sat down across from her. Because no one else will, and because it's the right thing to do. We sat in silence for a while. Helen eventually fell asleep on the couch, her body finally giving in to exhaustion. I stayed awake, sitting by the window with my gun on my lap. I didn't expect trouble, but I've learned never to assume you're safe. Around 6 in the morning, my phone buzzed. A text from Danny. Got something? Call me. I stepped into the bedroom and dialed. Talk to me, I said. Danny's voice was tense. Victor Crane is the real deal. He runs a trafficking network that spans 3 states. The motel Helen mentioned is legit. It's called the Starlight Motel. He owns it through a shell company, uses it as a temporary holding site before moving girls to other locations. But here's the problem. He's got serious protection. At least 2 cops on the city payroll, maybe more. And he's got muscle. Ex-military guys, the kind who know how to handle themselves. How many? At the motel, usually 4 or 5 at a time. They rotate shifts. I processed the information. What about security? Cameras? Alarms? Cameras outside. No alarms that I could find. But the place is isolated, no neighbors, no witnesses. If you're thinking about going in, you better have a plan. I always have a plan, Danny laughed dryly. That's what worries me. Be careful, Marcus. Crane doesn't mess around. People who cross him disappear. I'll keep that in mind, thanks, Danny. Don't mention it, seriously. Don't mention it to anyone. I hung up and went back to the living room. Helen was awake, sitting up and watching me. You found something, she said. I nodded. The motel is real. Your daughter might be there, but it's not going to be easy to get her out. Helen stood up. I don't care. I'll do anything. Just tell me what to do. I shook my head. You stay here. I'll handle it. No, she's my daughter. I'm coming with you. Helen, these are dangerous people. If something goes wrong, then I'll die trying to save her, she said firmly. I'm not sitting here doing nothing. I looked at her for a long moment. She was scared, but she was also determined. I recognized that look. It was the same look I'd seen in the mirror every day when I was deployed. The look of someone who had already made peace with the possibility of death. All right, I said. But you do exactly what I say. No arguments. Understood? Understood. I spent the next few hours preparing. I cleaned my gun, loaded extra magazines, and packed a bag with supplies, flashlights, zip ties, first aid kit. I also grabbed a crowbar and a set of bolt cutters. I didn't know what we'd find at the motel, but I wanted to be ready for anything. Helen watched me work in silence. When I was done, I looked at her. We go tonight, after dark. We scout the place first, see how many men are there, figure out the best way in. Then we move fast, get Sophia and get out. No heroics, no unnecessary risks. We're there for one reason only. Helen nodded. I understand. I checked my watch. It was almost noon. Get some rest, it's going to be a long night. We left the apartment just after 8 p.m. The Starlight Motel was a 40-minute drive from my place, located on a stretch of road that had been forgotten by the city. The businesses out here were either abandoned or barely hanging on. Perfect place for someone like Victor Crane to operate. I parked the truck half a mile away, behind an old gas station that had been closed for years. Helen and I walked the rest of the way, staying off the main road and moving through the trees that lined the property. The motel came into view after 10 minutes. It was a single-story building shaped like an L, with about 20 rooms total. Most of the windows were dark, but a few had lights on. There was a small office at the front, and I could see a man sitting inside, his feet up on the desk. Another man stood outside, smoking a cigarette near a black SUV parked in the lot. I pulled out a pair of binoculars and scanned the area. 2 men visible, probably more inside. I handed the binoculars to Helen. Do you see your daughter? She looked through them carefully, her hands trembling. I don't know. I can't see inside the rooms. All right, we wait. Watch the patterns. See how many men there are and when they move. We crouched in the trees for the next hour, observing. The man outside finished his cigarette and went into one of the rooms. Another man came out a few minutes later and walked to the office. They were rotating, changing shifts. That was good. It meant there were gaps, moments when fewer people were paying attention. Around 10 p.m., I saw movement in one of the rooms. The door opened and a young woman stepped out. She was thin, pale, and walked with her head down. A man followed her, guiding her toward another room. Helen grabbed my arm. That's her. That's Sophia. I looked through the binoculars again. The girl was young, maybe early 20s, with dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail. She looked exhausted, broken. The man with her opened another door and pushed her inside. Then he locked it from the outside. Are you sure that's her? I asked. Helen nodded, tears streaming down her face. Yes, that's my daughter. We have to get her out, now. I put a hand on her shoulder. We will, but we have to be smart. If we rush in, we'll get her killed. And us too. Helen wiped her eyes and nodded. Okay, what do we do? I studied the layout. The room Sophia was in was near the back of the motel, away from the office. That was good. Less visibility, but there were still at least 3 men on the property, maybe more. I needed a distraction. Here's the plan, I said. I'm going to cut the power to the building. When the lights go out, the men will move to check the breaker. That gives us a window. You stay here. When I signal, you run to Sophia's room. I'll meet you there. We get her out and we go, fast. Helen looked uncertain. What if something goes wrong? Then you run. Don't look back. Don't try to help me. Just get Sophia and run. She hesitated, then nodded. All right. I moved through the trees toward the back of the property, where I'd spotted the electrical box earlier. It was old and rusted, secured with a basic padlock. I used the bolt cutters to snap the lock, then opened the box. Inside were rows of breakers. I flipped them all off. The lights in the motel went dark immediately. I heard shouting from inside the building. Footsteps. The men were moving. I signaled to Helen, and she ran toward Sophia's room. I followed, staying low and fast. When we reached the door, I used the crowbar to pry it open. The lock broke with a loud crack. Inside, Sophia was huddled in the corner of the room, her arms wrapped around her knees. She looked up at us with wide, terrified eyes. "Sophia," Helen whispered. "It's me. It's Mom. We're getting you out of here." Sophia didn't move. She just stared at us like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. "Sophia, we have to go. Now." Helen reached for her daughter, but Sophia flinched. "It's okay," I said, keeping my voice calm. "We're here to help, but we don't have much time. Can you walk?" Sophia nodded slowly. Helen helped her to her feet, and we moved toward the door. That's when I heard voices outside. Close. Too close. "Check the rooms. All of them." I cursed under my breath and pushed Helen and Sophia back inside. "Stay quiet," I whispered. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. 2 men were walking down the row of rooms, flashlights in hand. They hadn't seen us yet. I moved quickly, closing the distance between us. The first man turned just as I reached him. I drove my fist into his jaw, and he dropped without a sound. The second man raised his flashlight, but I grabbed his arm and twisted it behind his back, forcing him to the ground. I zip-tied his hands and covered his mouth with duct tape. Then I dragged both men into an empty room and locked the door. I went back to Sophia's room and opened the door. "Let's go!" We moved fast, staying in the shadows and heading toward the trees. We were halfway there when I heard a shout behind us. "They're running! Stop them!" I turned and saw 3 men coming out of the motel, guns drawn. "Run!" I shouted. Helen and Sophia sprinted toward the trees. I stayed behind, pulling my gun and firing 2 shots into the air. The men dove for cover, giving Helen and Sophia time to disappear into the darkness. I fired 2 more shots, then turned and ran. Bullets hit the ground behind me, kicking up dirt and rocks. I zigzagged through the trees, using the cover to stay ahead of them. When I reached the gas station, Helen and Sophia were already at the truck. I jumped into the driver's seat and started the engine. "Hold on." I floored the gas and the truck roared out of the lot. Behind us I could see headlights. The black SUV was following. I took a hard turn onto the main road, the tires screeching. The SUV stayed close. I pushed the truck faster, weaving through traffic and running red lights. Helen held Sophia in the back seat, both of them silent and shaking. The SUV pulled up beside us, and the passenger window rolled down. A man leaned out with a gun. I swerved hard to the left, slamming into the side of the SUV. The man lost his balance and dropped the gun. I swerved again, harder this time, and the SUV spun out, crashing into a parked car. I didn't stop. I drove for another 10 minutes, taking random turns until I was sure we weren't being followed. Then I pulled into an empty parking lot and killed the engine. Helen and Sophia were both crying. I turned around and looked at them. "Are you hurt?" Helen shook her head. "No, we're okay. Thank you. Thank you so much." Sophia finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Who are you?" "Someone who helps people," I said. "That's all you need to know." I drove them to a safe house on the outskirts of the city. It belonged to a friend who owed me a favor. He wasn't there, but he'd left the key under the mat like I asked. Inside, the place was small but clean. I sat Helen and Sophia down and made them tea. "You'll be safe here for a few days," I said. "But you can't stay forever. Victor Crane knows you escaped. He'll be looking for you." Helen nodded. "What do we do?" "I'll make some calls, get you new identities, help you relocate somewhere far from here. But you need to lay low until then. Don't contact anyone, don't use your phones, don't leave this house." Helen grabbed my hand. "How can I ever repay you?" "You don't have to. Just take care of your daughter." I left them there and drove back to my apartment. I was exhausted, but I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Victor Crane, about the other girls still trapped at that motel, about the cops on his payroll. The next morning I got a call from Danny. "I heard about what happened last night. You're all over Crane's radar now. He's put a price on your head, $50,000. I wasn't surprised. "Good. Let him come." "Marcus, this isn't a joke. These people don't play around. You need to disappear for a while." "I'm not running, Danny, not until Crane is finished." Danny sighed. "Then you're going to need help. I'll see what I can do." He hung up. I spent the next week preparing. I gathered more information on Crane's operation. tracked his movements, identified his associates, and I started taking them down one by one. I hit his supply lines, burned his safe houses, freed more girls. Each time I left a message, a warning, that someone was coming for him and that he couldn't hide forever. 3 weeks later, I got word that Victor Crane had left the city, fled to another state. His network was in shambles. The police, under pressure from the media and the feds, finally started investigating his operation. Several corrupt cops were arrested. The Starlight Motel was shut down. Helen and Sophia were safe in a new city, living under new names. They sent me a letter thanking me. I never wrote back. The weeks after the motel raid were a blur of action and consequences. I didn't sit still. I couldn't. Every day I woke up knowing there were more girls out there, more victims trapped in that same nightmare Sophia had been living. So I kept working. I used the information I'd gathered from Crane's operation to identify his associates, his distributors, his customers. I made a list and I started checking names off one by one. The first target was a warehouse on the industrial side of town. Danny had tipped me off that Crane used it to store fake documents and passports for moving girls across state lines. I went in at 3 in the morning, cut the power, and destroyed everything, burned the files, smashed the computers, left the place in ruins. The second target was a lawyer named Richard Foss. He handled Crane's shell companies and kept his money clean. I didn't hurt him. I didn't have to. I just showed up at his office one night and left a folder on his desk. Inside were copies of every illegal transaction he'd ever made for Crane. Bank transfers, property deeds, falsified contracts. I also left a note. The feds are watching. Turn yourself in, or I'll deliver this to them myself. 2 days later, Foss walked into the FBI field office and confessed everything. The third target was a nightclub downtown. It looked legitimate on the surface, but I knew better. Crane used it as a recruitment ground. His men would drug girls at the bar and take them out the back door. No one ever saw them again. I didn't burn the place down. Instead, I installed hidden cameras in the back rooms and the alley. Then I waited. Within a week, I had footage of 3 abductions. I sent the videos to every news station in the city. The story went viral. Protests erupted outside the club. The mayor was forced to respond. Within days, the club was raided and shut down. 4 men were arrested. But the biggest blow to Crane's operation came from inside. One of his lieutenants, a man named Tommy Ruiz, had been skimming money for months. I found out through Danny and I used it. I leaked the information to Crane's inner circle, made it look like Tommy was planning to take over. Within 48 hours, Tommy disappeared. Crane's own people took care of him, and with Tommy gone, the organization started to fracture. Trust broke down. People started talking to save themselves. That's when the feds got involved. They'd been watching Crane for years but never had enough evidence to move. Now, with his network collapsing and witnesses coming forward, they finally had their case. Warrants were issued. Raids were conducted. And Crane, realizing he was finished, ran. He left the city in the middle of the night, taking what money he could and abandoning everyone who'd worked for him. I heard he made it to Nevada, bought a new identity and went underground. Part of me wanted to go after him, track him down and finish what I started, but I knew that wasn't the right move. Crane was done. His operation was destroyed, and eventually the law would catch up to him. My focus needed to stay here, on the people he left behind, on the victims who still needed help. Helen and Sophia left the city 2 weeks after the rescue. I arranged for them to get new social security numbers, new birth certificates, and enough cash to start over. They moved to a small town in Oregon, where no one knew their names or their story. Helen sent me a letter a week later. It was handwritten on plain white paper. She thanked me for saving Sophia's life. She said they were safe and happy and trying to rebuild. She asked if there was anything she could do to repay me. I read the letter once, then burned it. I didn't need thanks. I didn't need repayment. I just needed to know they were okay, and they were. That was enough. But even with Crane gone and his network dismantled, I couldn't shake the feeling that the work wasn't finished, because I knew the truth. Crane wasn't the only predator out there. He wasn't even the worst. There were others, men and women who trafficked people like merchandise, who destroyed lives for profit, who operated in the shadows because they knew most people wouldn't fight back. But I would. I'd seen too much to walk away now. I'd crossed a line the night I rescued Sophia, and there was no going back. I wasn't a soldier anymore. I wasn't working for the government or following orders. I was something else now, something outside the system, a vigilante, a ghost, someone who did the things that needed to be done when no one else would do them. The days after Crane's departure were quiet, too quiet. I went back to my night shifts at the warehouse. I tried to fall into the old routine, clock in, do the work, clock out, go home, but it felt wrong, empty, like I was pretending to be someone I wasn't anymore. I'd tasted purpose again. I'd felt the adrenaline of a mission, the satisfaction of protecting people who couldn't protect themselves, and I couldn't let that go. So I started looking for the next fight. I reached out to my contacts, Danny, a few other ex-military guys who did private security work, a retired cop who'd left the force because he was tired of watching criminals walk free. I asked them the same question. Who else is out there? Who else is hurting people and getting away with it? The answers came slowly at first, then faster. There was a loan shark on the west side who beat people to death when they couldn't pay, a gang that was forcing teenage boys to sell drugs and killing anyone who refused, a slumlord who locked immigrant families in condemned buildings and charged them twice the rent. The list kept growing. And with each name I felt the fire inside me burn hotter. I started planning, gathering intel, watching patterns. I treated it like I was back in the service. Every target was a mission. Every mission had an objective. Get in, complete the objective. Get out, minimize collateral damage, protect the innocent. I didn't take unnecessary risks. I didn't act out of anger or revenge. I was methodical, precise, efficient, and I was careful. I knew that if I got caught, it was over. I'd go to prison for the rest of my life, but I also knew that the alternative was worse. Doing nothing, watching from the sidelines while people suffered. I couldn't live with that, so I accepted the risk, and I kept moving forward. That night, I was sitting in my apartment when I heard a knock on the door. It was late, almost midnight. I wasn't expecting anyone. I grabbed my gun from the table and approached the door carefully. I looked through the peephole and saw a young woman standing in the hallway. She was thin, with dark hair pulled into a ponytail. She looked nervous. Her hands were shaking. I didn't recognize her. I opened the door slowly, keeping the gun behind my back. "Can I help you?" She looked up at me with wide eyes. "Are you Marcus Hale?" I didn't answer right away. I studied her face. She was young, maybe 19 or 20. She had bruises on her arms and a fading black eye. She'd been hurt. Recently. "Who's asking?" I said. She swallowed hard. "My name is Emily. I was one of the girls you saved from the motel. I heard you're the one who took down Victor Crane." I relaxed slightly but kept my guard up. "I didn't do it alone." She smiled, but it was a sad smile, the kind that came from someone who'd been through hell and was still trying to find a way back. "Still, you saved my life, and I wanted to say thank you, and to ask for your help." I frowned. "With what?" Emily glanced over her shoulder like she was worried someone might be listening. Then she looked back at me. "There are more men like Victor Crane, more girls being taken. I've been trying to move on, trying to forget, but I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see the faces of the other girls who are still out there, and I keep thinking that someone has to do something. And then I heard about you, about what you did, and I thought maybe you could help." I looked at her for a long moment. She was scared, traumatized, but she was also brave. Brave enough to come here, brave enough to ask for help, brave enough to want to fight back. I stepped aside. "Come in. Let's talk." She walked into the apartment and I closed the door behind her. I put the gun back on the table and gestured for her to sit. She sat on the edge of the couch, her hands folded in her lap. I sat across from her. "Tell me everything," I said. Emily took a deep breath. "After you rescued me, the police put me in a shelter. They said I'd be safe there, that they'd help me get back on my feet. But the shelter was full of other girls, girls who'd been through the same thing I had, and I started talking to them, listening to their stories, and I realized that Victor Crane was just one piece of a much bigger problem." She paused and looked down at her hands. "There's a network, a whole network of people who do this. Traffickers, pimps, buyers. They're all connected, and they're all still operating. Crane might be gone, but the others are still out there, and they're not stopping." I leaned forward. "Do you have names? Locations?" Emily nodded. "Some. There's a man named Leon Briggs. He runs a trucking company, but he uses the trucks to transport girls across state lines. And there's a woman named Sandra Vega. She recruits girls, tells them she's offering modeling jobs or acting opportunities. but it's all a lie. Once the girls sign the contracts, they're trapped. I pulled out a notebook and started writing. Anyone else? Emily hesitated. There's a place, a mansion on the north side of the city. It's owned by a man named David Harmon. He's rich, connected, untouchable, but I heard from some of the other girls that he hosts parties, private parties, and that's where a lot of the trafficking happens. Girls are brought in as entertainment, and some of them never leave. I stopped writing and looked up at her. How do you know all this? Emily's eyes filled with tears. Because I was almost sent to one of those parties. Before you rescued me, they were going to move me there the next day, and I heard the men talking about it, about Harmon, about how much money he paid for the girls, about how no one could touch him because he had judges and politicians in his pocket. I set the notebook down. Emily, this is dangerous information. If these people find out you're talking, I don't care, she said, her voice stronger now. I'm tired of being scared. I'm tired of hiding. These people destroyed my life. They destroyed the lives of so many girls. And if no one stops them, they'll keep doing it forever. So I'm asking you, please help me stop them. I looked at her for a long moment. She was right. These people needed to be stopped, and the system wasn't going to do it. The police were either corrupt or overwhelmed. The courts were slow and full of loopholes. The victims were too scared to testify. It would take years to build a case. And in those years, how many more girls would suffer? How many more lives would be destroyed? I made a decision. All right, I said. I'll help you. But you need to understand something. This isn't going to be easy. These people have money and power. They'll fight back. And if we do this, there's no guarantee we'll survive. Emily nodded. I understand. But I'd rather die fighting than spend the rest of my life running. I respected that. Okay, then here's what we're going to do. We're going to gather as much information as we can. Names, addresses, patterns. We're going to build a case. And then we're going to take them down one by one, starting with Leon Briggs. Emily's eyes lit up. You really mean it? I don't say things I don't mean. She smiled, and this time it was genuine. Thank you. Thank you so much. I stood up. Don't thank me yet. We have a lot of work to do, and it's going to be dangerous. Are you sure you're ready for this? Emily stood up too. I'm ready. I nodded. Good. Come back tomorrow night. We'll start planning. She walked to the door, then turned back. Marcus, why are you doing this? You don't owe me anything. You don't owe any of us anything. I thought about that for a moment. Because someone has to. And because I've seen what happens when good people do nothing. I won't be one of those people, not anymore. Emily smiled again, then left. I closed the door and locked it. Then I walked to the window and looked out at the city. The streets were dark and empty. But I knew the truth. Beneath the surface, there was a war going on. A war between predators and prey. Between people who took what they wanted and people who had everything taken from them. For years, I'd watched from the sidelines. I'd told myself it wasn't my problem. That I'd done my part when I served in the military. That I deserved to live a quiet life. But I was wrong because the war never ends. It just changes locations. And the enemy is always the same. People who hurt the innocent. People who profit from suffering. People who believe they're above the law. I couldn't stop all of them, I knew that. But I could stop some. I could save some. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all anyone could do. I turned away from the window and walked back to the table. I picked up the notebook and read through the names Emily had given me. Leon Briggs, Sandra Vega, David Harmon. Each name represented countless victims, countless lives destroyed, countless families torn apart. But each name also represented an opportunity, a chance to make things right, a chance to fight back. I grabbed my phone and started making calls. I reached out to Danny, to my other contacts. I told them I had work, big work, and I needed their help. They didn't ask questions, they knew better, they just said yes. By the time the sun came up, I had a plan. We'd start with Leon Briggs, track his trucks, follow his routes, find out where he was taking the girls. Then we'd intercept, free the victims, and make sure Briggs never hurt anyone again. It wouldn't be legal, it wouldn't be clean, but it would be justice. The kind of justice the system couldn't deliver. The kind of justice that required someone to step into the darkness and fight. And I was ready. I'd been ready for a long time. I just hadn't admitted it to myself until now. Outside, the city was waking up. People were going to work, living their lives, unaware of the battles being fought in the shadows, unaware of the people like Emily who were suffering, unaware of the predators who walked among them, but I was aware, and I wasn't going to look away. Not anymore. I walked to the closet and pulled out a duffel bag. Inside were the tools of my trade: guns, ammunition, tactical gear, everything I needed to do what had to be done. I checked each item carefully, made sure everything was in working order. Then I zipped the bag closed and set it by the door. Tomorrow night the work would begin. Tomorrow night I would start hunting the hunters, and I wouldn't stop until every last one of them was brought to justice, because that's who I was now. Not a soldier, not a warehouse worker, not just a man trying to live a quiet life. I was something more, something necessary, a protector, a fighter, a force standing between the innocent and those who would harm them. And as long as there were people out there who needed help, I would be there, watching, waiting, ready to act. Because sometimes justice doesn't come from the law. Sometimes it comes from people willing to step into the darkness and fight. People like me. And I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. The war was just beginning, and I intended to win.